They thought endurance meant weakness. They assumed your silence was surrender, that patience was permission, that restraint was something to be exploited. But what they never understood is this: you were watching, learning, measuring. You were not shrinking, you were gathering strength. While they mistook calm for compliance, you were mastering self-control, the kind that does not announce itself, the kind that waits until clarity arrives. You did not collapse under pressure. You stood still inside it, and in that stillness something important happened. You began to see clearly, not just the situation, but the people within it. The tone of their voices changed. Their respect disappeared when they were challenged. Their kindness depended on control. You didn't have to accuse them. You didn't have to confront them. Their behavior did all the speaking for you. This is not a story of bitterness or revenge. It is a story of awakening, of realizing that strength is not loud and dignity does not need an audience. Some people only reveal themselves when they believe they have power over you. And the moment you stopped trying to be understood, the truth stepped forward on its own. They didn't break you, they revealed themselves, and that revelation changed everything. Pressure is a mirror, not a weapon. Pressure has a way of being misunderstood. People often believe it exists to destroy, to weaken, to bend a person until there is nothing left. But pressure does not create character. It does not plant cruelty, patience, or integrity inside a human being. Pressure simply removes the cover. It pulls the mask away and leaves the truth standing alone. What you lived through was not an attack meant to break you. It was a moment that revealed who everyone truly was, including you. When the weight increased and expectations became unreasonable, you did not respond with chaos. You did not mirror aggression or match disrespect with disrespect. Instead, you slowed down. You listened more than you spoke. You absorbed more than you reacted. That choice alone separated you from the situation. While others allowed pressure to expose impatience and control, it revealed your restraint. That is not accidental. That is discipline. And discipline is not born in comfort. It is proven under strain. There is a quiet strength in not becoming what challenges you. Anyone can react. Anyone can raise their voice, defend their ego, or attempt to dominate a moment. But it takes self-command to remain composed when tension demands an emotional response. You were not frozen. You were deliberate. You understood, perhaps without realizing it at the time, that how you respond under pressure becomes your signature, and you chose to sign your name with dignity. Pressure also exposes intention. When things were easy, harmony seemed mutual. Respect appeared natural. But the moment circumstances demanded patience and fairness, some people revealed a different side. Their tone shifted. Their empathy disappeared. Their cooperation became conditional. This was not because you changed. It was because the environment no longer allowed them to pretend. Pressure did not turn them into something else. It showed you who they had always been beneath the surface. You may have questioned yourself during that time. You may have wondered if you were too quiet, too patient, too willing to see the good. But reflection is not self-blame. Reflection is intelligence at work. You were not losing strength. You were refining it. You were learning the difference between endurance and self-erasure, between loyalty and self-respect. Pressure was teaching you discernment, not defeat. It is important to understand this. Being calm in a tense situation does not mean you lack boundaries. It means you are aware enough not to hand your power to chaos. You observed patterns. You noticed who listened and who demanded, who respected limits and who tested them. Pressure gave you data and you paid attention. That awareness is a form of protection no one can take from you. Some people mistake composure for weakness because they only understand power in loud forms. They believe dominance must be visible, that control must be enforced. When they encounter someone who remains steady without needing to assert superiority, it confuses them, and confusion often leads to exposure. Their impatience grows, their respect fades, their true nature steps forward without being invited. This is not something you caused, this is something you witnessed. You also discovered something essential about yourself. You learned that you do not need to be understood by everyone to remain whole. You do not need approval to stand firm. Under pressure, you stayed aligned with your values. You did not abandon fairness for comfort or integrity for acceptance. That realization changes a person. It builds an internal authority that does not rely on external validation. Pressure ends illusions. It clarifies reality. It shows you who can be trusted when circumstances are heavy and who only appears when conditions are easy. That knowledge is costly, but it is valuable. You paid attention, and because of that, you are no longer confused. You no longer romanticize behavior that requires you to shrink. You no longer confuse tolerance with virtue. In the end, pressure did not take anything from you. It gave you sight. It revealed your emotional strength, your patience, and your ability to remain grounded when tested. And it revealed others in ways words never could. You walked away with clarity, not damage, with self-knowledge, not shame. Pressure was never your enemy. It was the mirror that showed you the truth. And once you see it, you are never the same again. Endurance is not submission. Endurance is often misunderstood by those who have never practiced it with awareness. Many assume that staying quiet means agreeing, that patience signals fear, or that tolerance is the same as surrender. But endurance, when guided by conscience and self-respect, is not submission. It is a deliberate choice to remain grounded while gathering understanding. You did not stay because you were powerless. You stayed because you believed in fairness, resolution, and the possibility that people could rise to their better nature. There is a difference between enduring with intention and remaining stuck out of self-doubt. You were not frozen in place. You were observing patterns, measuring behavior, and listening beyond words. While others spoke loudly, you listened deeply. While they reacted impulsively, you responded thoughtfully. This inner restraint was not a lack of courage. It was controlled strength. And controlled strength is often invisible to those who equate power with volume. At some point, however, endurance begins to teach its final lesson. It shows you where patience heals and where it enables. You began to notice that explanations were no longer met with understanding, that compromise only moved in one direction, and that your calm was taken for granted. This was not the moment you lost yourself. This was the moment you found clarity. Endurance had done its work. It had given you enough information to see the truth without emotional distortion. Choosing not to react immediately does not mean you accepted what was happening. It means you refused to make permanent decisions from temporary emotions. You allowed time to expose consistency. You watched who corrected themselves and who repeated the same behavior once they felt safe doing so. That observation gave you certainty, and certainty is far more powerful than impulse. Some people become uncomfortable around those who endure with dignity. They expect resistance or collapse. When neither appears, they misinterpret calm as permission. This misunderstanding reveals their intentions. They escalate, test boundaries, and push limits, not because you invited it, but because your restraint removed their mask. Endurance became the light that showed their expectations, not your weakness. There is also a quiet courage in giving someone space to reveal themselves fully. You did not rush to label or accuse. You allowed behavior to speak repeatedly until it could not be denied. That required emotional strength. It required faith in your own perception. And once that trust formed within you, you no longer needed external validation to confirm what you already knew. Eventually, endurance transforms into self-respect. There comes a moment when staying no longer aligns with who you are becoming, not because you are angry, but because you are clear. You realize that protecting your inner stability is not abandonment. It is responsibility. Walking away is not a failure of patience. It is the completion of it. You did not leave in chaos. You did not announce your departure with hostility or drama. You simply withdrew your presence, your energy, and your access. That silence was not avoidance. It was finality. You understood that explaining yourself further would only repeat a cycle that no longer served you, and in that decision, endurance revealed its true purpose: to teach you when enough is enough. Those who mistook your endurance for submission were forced to confront their error. They expected compliance and found boundaries. They anticipated silence and encountered distance, not because you changed suddenly, but because you had finished learning what endurance came to teach you, and once the lesson is complete, staying would only dishonor it. Endurance shaped you, but it did not define your limits. It refined your judgment and strengthened your inner authority. You emerged not hardened, but clearer, not bitter, but resolved. You now understand that patience is a tool, not a sentence, and when used wisely, it leads you not into submission, but into self-command. You did not endure to lose yourself, you endured to understand, and once understanding arrived, you chose yourself, calmly, decisively, and without apology. Their behavior answered questions you never asked. You did not enter the situation looking for conflict, proof, or exposure. You were not investigating anyone's character or searching for hidden intentions. You simply showed up as you were, honest, respectful, and willing to engage with clarity. But there is something powerful about quiet presence. It creates a space where people reveal themselves without being pressured, and in that space, answers appear without a single question being spoken. You noticed it gradually. The shift in tone when you stopped explaining yourself, the discomfort that surfaced when you chose silence over justification, the defensiveness that appeared the moment you stopped seeking approval. None of this required confrontation, none of it required accusations. Their reactions told you everything you needed to know. Behavior, when consistent, becomes a confession. You learned that words are often carefully managed, but actions are less disciplined. People can promise respect, fairness, and understanding, but when circumstances test those promises, the truth surfaces. When you remained steady and emotionally contained, it unsettled those who relied on control or validation. Your calm disrupted expectations, and disruption often reveals intention. At times, you may have wondered if you were imagining things. That is a common experience when clarity is forming. But patterns do not lie. Repetition removes doubt. You watched how empathy disappeared when it was inconvenient. You noticed how cooperation was offered only when it benefited one side. You saw how boundaries were treated as personal offenses rather than mutual agreements. These were not misunderstandings. These were disclosures. There is a unique kind of wisdom in letting people show you who they are instead of forcing explanations out of them. You resisted the urge to interrogate or defend yourself endlessly. You understood, perhaps instinctively, that arguing with behavior only delays clarity, so you observed, and in observing you gathered truth without distortion. When you stopped reacting emotionally, their behavior grew louder. When you stopped chasing understanding, their insecurity became visible. When you chose dignity over persuasion, their need for control surfaced. This is not manipulation on your part. This is natural exposure. People often reveal their values when they believe they are no longer being evaluated. You also discovered that silence can be a powerful filter. It removes performance. Without constant feedback or reassurance, people act from habit rather than intention. And habits are honest. You did not have to trap anyone in contradiction. You simply watched consistency unfold. What repeated itself was real. This realization changes how you move through the world. You no longer need excessive explanations. You no longer need to convince people of your worth or intentions. You understand now that those who respect you do not require endless clarification, and those who don't will reveal that through behavior, no matter how polished their words may sound. There is no anger in this understanding. There is relief. Relief that you no longer carry confusion that was never yours to solve. Relief that you no longer personalize actions rooted in someone else's limitations. Clarity brings calm, not resentment. It allows you to step back without bitterness and move forward without doubt. You did not ask for these answers. You did not demand them. They arrived because you created space for truth to stand on its own, and once seen, truth cannot be undone. You may still wish others well, but you no longer place them in roles they cannot fulfill. Awareness has adjusted your expectations, and that adjustment is a form of peace. In the end, you were not exposed, they were. Not through accusation, but through consistency. Not through conflict, but through contrast. Your steadiness became the backdrop against which their behavior was clearly visible. And that is why you walk away grounded, not shaken. You did not lose anything in this process. You gained sight, and sight once gained becomes protection. Growth makes some people uncomfortable. Growth is rarely loud. It does not announce itself with dramatic changes or sudden declarations. Most of the time, it happens quietly. In the way you pause before reacting, in the way you choose restraint over explanation, in the way you stop shrinking to keep others comfortable. And it is precisely this quiet growth that unsettles some people. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because your evolution interrupts the version of you they learned how to manage. You did not become distant out of pride. You became selective out of awareness. You started listening to your inner signals instead of external pressure. You questioned patterns that once felt normal. You recognized that peace should not require self-erasure. This shift was subtle, but it was undeniable. And when you changed internally, the dynamics around you changed as well. Some people depend on predictability, not stability. They are comfortable when they know how you will respond, how much you will tolerate, how far they can go without consequence. Growth disrupts that certainty. When you stop over-explaining, they feel unsettled. When you stop rescuing situations, they feel exposed. When you stop reacting emotionally, they feel powerless. Your maturity removes the environment they relied on. You may have noticed resistance disguised as concern. Questions framed as care but rooted in control. Advice offered not to support your growth but to slow it down. This is not always intentional. Often, people are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the loss of familiarity. Your growth reminds them of areas where they have chosen comfort over evolution. There is a deep truth here. Not everyone wants peace, even if they speak the language of harmony. Some people are more comfortable in chaos they can predict than in calm they cannot control. When you stop participating in confusion, it threatens systems built on emotional dependency. Your boundaries feel like rejection to those who benefited from your availability. You did not become cold. You became clear. You did not withdraw love. You withdrew access to patterns that drained you. That distinction matters. Growth is not about punishing others. It is about protecting alignment, and alignment often requires distance from what no longer fits. This discomfort you witnessed was not caused by arrogance or superiority. It was caused by contrast. Your steadiness highlighted instability. Your calm highlighted reactivity. Your accountability highlighted avoidance. Growth acts like a silent spotlight. It does not accuse, it reveals. You may have felt guilt at times, questioning whether you were changing too much or becoming difficult. But growth often feels uncomfortable before it feels right. That discomfort is a signal that you are no longer betraying yourself to maintain connection. You are choosing honesty over harmony and self-respect over approval. Those who are willing to grow with you will adjust. They will communicate, reflect, and meet you at a higher level of awareness. Those who cannot will resist, criticize, or distance themselves. Neither response is your responsibility to manage. Growth does not require consensus. It requires courage. You learned that staying the same to preserve comfort comes at a higher cost than evolving and facing resistance. You chose growth not to elevate yourself above others, but to return to yourself. That choice changed how you relate, how you listen, and how you decide when to stay and when to step back. In the end, growth did not isolate you. It refined your circle. It clarified your standards. It aligned your inner world with your outward life. And if some people felt uncomfortable, it was not because you became less kind. It was because you became less controllable. You did not outgrow people out of ego. You outgrew patterns out of self-respect. And that kind of growth, even when misunderstood, is always worth it. You walk away with integrity. They stay with exposure. Walking away is often misinterpreted as defeat, avoidance, or emotional collapse. But there is a form of departure that carries no bitterness, no noise, and no need for explanation. It is the kind of leaving that happens after clarity has settled and the lesson has been fully understood. You did not walk away because you were overwhelmed. You walked away because you were awake, and that awareness changed the meaning of everything. You reached a point where proving yourself no longer felt necessary. You understood that dignity does not argue and self-respect does not beg to be recognized. The more you explained, the more the cycle repeated. So you chose stillness over performance, silence over persuasion, distance over emotional exhaustion. That choice was not sudden. It was the result of everything you had observed, endured, and learned. Integrity is quiet. It does not announce itself or demand applause. It shows up in decisions that protect your values even when no one is watching. You left without distorting the truth or damaging anyone's reputation. You did not need to expose or accuse. Their behavior had already done that over time. You simply removed yourself from the environment where confusion was normalized. There is power in leaving without trying to control the narrative. When you stop defending yourself, reality speaks on its own. Consistency reveals character, patterns become visible, and those who once relied on your presence to maintain balance are left to face the atmosphere they helped create. This is not punishment, this is consequence. You may have felt the urge to explain one last time, to be fully understood before closing the door. But maturity taught you that understanding cannot be forced. Those who are willing to reflect will do so without your guidance. Those who are not will reinterpret no matter how clearly you speak. Integrity means accepting that not everyone will receive your truth and choosing peace anyway. Walking away also means releasing the need for closure in familiar forms. You realize that closure does not always come through conversation. Sometimes it comes through distance, sometimes it comes through acceptance, and sometimes it comes through recognizing that silence is the most honest response available. They remain where exposure found them, not because you wanted it that way, but because growth requires accountability. You did not freeze them in that position. You simply stopped carrying the weight that allowed imbalance to continue. Once you stepped aside, everything stood as it was. You, on the other hand, carried forward insight. You learned to trust your perception. You learned to recognize patterns without denying them. You learned that your calm is not something to be tested, but something to be protected. These lessons do not fade. They become part of how you move through the world. This is not a story of victory over others. It is a story of alignment within yourself. You did not leave to prove a point. You left to preserve your integrity. And integrity, once chosen, reshapes your future decisions. It influences who you allow close, how you respond under pressure, and what you no longer tolerate. In time, the noise fades, the confusion dissolves. What remains is clarity, steady, grounded, and intact. You did not lose yourself in the process. You found yourself, and that is why you walk forward lighter, not heavier. You are not carrying resentment or regret. You are carrying understanding. They didn't break you, they revealed themselves, and you responded not with anger, but with integrity. That response will outlast every misunderstanding, every reaction, and every moment of doubt. Because when you walk away with integrity, nothing of value is lost, only what was never meant to remain.